So hello and welcome to New Junction, and hello and welcome to my garden and my garden railway special, in which I'll be taking you through my process of how I build a double track O-gauge railway through my garden. Hopefully you enjoy. No, what kind of video do you think this is? We're absolutely not doing that. Absolutely not doing that. I know it's a garden railway video, but no, I'm not lowering myself to that level. Oh, go on then. So I've got a couple of offcuts of timber I wanted to run through with you quickly, just to show you what I'm using. So for the actual supports that go into the metapost, into the ground, I've got 75 by 75 mil treated timber. Now I've got these in 4.8 metre lengths. Now for obvious reasons I'm showing you an offcut because I'm not having a 5 metre post for this video. But once treated up and then raised above the ground, these won't go anywhere and they'll serve you well. So attaching to the post and giving my horizontal support are these 47 by 47 beams. Same again, they come in the same length, nearly 5 metres. And again, attach them on, easy peasy. I'm going for 10.25 inch widths, and that gives me just bigger than double track in O-gauge, almost triple track. So what gives me the sideways support for my timber is this 70 by, I believe it's 25 mil treated timber, and again same comes in the 4.8 metre lengths, and again added onto the side, give you some nice stability in between your posts, and it won't go anywhere, trust me. It also provides a very good base to put your plywood tops into. Now I'm using 18 mil untreated plywood, and I'm using that because it's cheaper. I think it was £20 difference between a treated sheet and a untreated sheet. So I went for the untreated, as you can imagine, because I'm not made of money. And all I'll do is I'll treat these myself with some fence paint, and then for every cut I make, I will PVA the sides before they go on. And then ultimately, that'll be covered in roofing felt anyway, so hopefully this railway will see me for some years. Right, let's get on with some of the tools. Right, so tools wise, as you can see, we've got quite a selection along with the dog. So I'll start from left to right for you. We've got a trusty drill. Now, of course, that is for drilling and screwing. We're doing a lot with woodwork, and if you can have two, that is better. Just makes the job a bit faster. We also have a spade, as you imagine. If you're moving any kind of earthwork, unfortunately there's a lot of manual labour in a garden railway. Again, dealing with some wood, so we need wood saws. That goes with the circular saw, and I've also got a jigsaw as well. Now, we've seen these before. These are stakes made from pallets. Now these have multiple purposes. I use them to plot where the railway is going to go. I also use it to judge the height of the railway by using the metre distances apart, using a spirit level, and then we can judge the height of the posts, which will then support the main railway. You can also use these, especially if you're working on your own, to help anchor in the support posts as you're working around the railway. This block represents timber. As you'd imagine, you need quite a lot of that, and the better timber you can get treated, the longer it'll last you in the garden. So, going along with the theme of the woodwork, you've got a small hammer and a big hammer. Now, these are relatively invaluable. Now, of course, I need the mallet because I'm using the metaposts, and I'd never get these into the ground without them. So we've mentioned it just. Spirit levels, these are absolutely essential because if your railway's not flat, your trains won't go anywhere. as I'm working in an established garden, and you're working with, ooh, you like these? I'm working with freshly cut timber. Some gloves are handy because otherwise you'll get splinters forever. You'll need endless amounts of screws. And as you can see, as I demonstrate, knee pads to the floor. These are invaluable as well because they save your knees, and believe me, you're on your knees quite a lot in this game. I have small secateurs and big secateurs because going through an established garden particularly, you're cutting away quite a lot of foliage. So again, another essential bits of kit. And Lulu moves. I have a hoe just because I thought it'd be funny to say everyone needs a hoe in their life. So there we go. That's an example of some of the tools I'm working with. And right, let's show you what I'm going to do with them. So here we are at the end of the patio and the start of what I like to call phase 1, or in real terms, the left-hand side of the garden. So as you can see, it starts just to the side of the step off the patio, and as we've put the framing in so far, I wanted to do a section first just to sort of iron out any niggles I may have. The next phase for this particular part is to paint it up and then do the plywood tops. So if I bring you round, this was probably, or is probably going to be, the most trickiest part of the entire build, because it's the only part of the entire railway where the soil is higher than the track bed. So I've actually had to dig quite a cutting through this hole, and annoyingly it wasn't really worth filming, but it was quite a tight spot to get around that corner. It does look quite tight, it looks quite pinched, but the plywood on top won't be. So when that's all in, we'll have a nice sweeping banked curve. And then moving down, you can see particularly the track bed level, the soil has already started to drop off there. And would you believe it, that's almost 15 metres worth of railway put in. So I'm just at the end of laying another section of track bed, and this is now all plumb and level. I'm about to prepare the space for the next run. Now, of course, I'm doing it in 4.8 metre lengths per time, so that's quite a bit of space. So I'm going to show you my process now as I clear the next bit and make sure there's room to do the next bit. So let's get on. So as you can see, I'm getting the full behind the scenes tour of the garden. Stood behind this giant hebe bush. Basically all I'm doing is just having a quick scan of where the track bed will go, because if I can't get there, the track bed's not going to be able to get there, because you do have to have access. So I've got my trusty cutters, and I'm going through any plants I can cut out. I will cut out just to make any more access that I can do. But looking at this, there will be a slight S-bend going around here, because as you can see to your left, there's a rose bush down there. You've got the trunk of the hebe just here. I will have to come around that, and then it's got to be at an angle to get to the pond. So all that'll mean is the side braces to the actual track bed have to have more notches in them to be able to bend at a tighter radius. But all fairly simple, and Lulu's helping me do it as well, so it's all part of the fun. Right, let's get to cutting. So now I've cleared a path for the new track bed. The next one is to take one of the side lengths. Now this is a 4.8 metre length, so quite a handful, and basically see if it'll fit round the S-bend I need to make it go. Now a top tip for you, if it doesn't go, or there are tight spots where it needs to bend more, you can cut notches into the wood. Now, the way I do this is try and thread this through as best I can, and then take a pencil to the areas where it needs to bend more and mark them out as it needs a bit of notching putting into the piece of wood. And then just mimic that twice over, and hopefully with a bit of fettling and a handy assistant, it should go round. So, fingers crossed, let's see if it works. So as you can see, I've loosely put that beam in, and as we thought, it needs to curve round the hebe on the right there. That's the big bush. What I've done is I've gone over it with a pencil just to mark out where I'd like the notches. So up until this first stake there, I put notches on or pencil marks on the left hand side. to allow the wood to curve to the left, and then when we get to the Hebe back here, I've put notches on the right hand side, so it allows the piece of wood to then bend around towards the pond. So if I walk around now, just to show you what I'm dealing with the other end. Might be hard to gauge where you are, but this is the other side of the Hebe, and you can see the plank of wood, which will have to bend quite dramatically round to come to where this stake is down here, and then to go in front of the pond. Just to give you a bit more reference as to where you are, you can see the plank of wood is just coming through here, and it's going to go behind this lighter bush, and it's going to come straight. You see the stakes there marking out where the track is, and that's where I'm going. Right, onto the circular saw. So here I am about to address the stretch of wood which goes in front of the pond. Now, it comes straight out of an S-bend, and this is the start of it. So far, it's only the ends here that are attached to the central post there. Now, because I'm on my own, I do need this to curve round so that the edges screw in nicely. I wanted to show you my trick to that. Now, these stakes I've made out of pallets. If you you can temporarily hammer them in certain places, and then wrap the actual side panelling round to form the right curve, so that the join here is nice and flush, and that's a really handy technique. And again, you only need to hammer them in about halfway, and then they easily come back out. Right, it's worked for me so far. So as you can see, I've come around the back of this Hebe. I've made a bit of a clearing, but it's looking all right. It's ever so tight just here. The curve really is a bit tighter than I wanted to, but that's because the trunk there is right there. But I think I'll bank that with the track laying, and that should be quite a nice angle. So let's get on. So it's time to put in the next metapost into the garden. Now, these are the strength to my base work for the garden railway. Now, you can pick metaposts like these, fence posts in effect, that you just hammer in, or you can dig a hole and put the timber straight into some postcrete. I've gone for the metapost because I feel it's easier, and also because it's an established garden, I don't want to go digging big holes in the flower beds, even though I have made quite a bit of a mess so far. Right, the first stage is you put your piece of timber in that's pre-measured to where the roughly the height of the trap bed's going to be. The important part with this is to make sure it goes in plumb, or as plumb as you can. So spirit level is essential. So as you're malleting it down, you've got to every so often just use a spirit level, because if it doesn't go in straight, you'll know about it. And believe me, digging one out is a pain. So you don't want to be going there. I've seen online and read some advice that with posts like this, you should always turn them sort of, if you're right-handed, an eighth anti-clockwise or clockwise or whatever, just so that by the time it's in the ground, it's the right direction that you want it. In reality, in practice, I've found with this particular layout I've built so far, roughly speaking, if I can push it in as far as I can with just my hefty body weight, usually it'll stay roughly there, so I don't need to worry about twisting it in any which direction. It's also worth noting that when you're using the giant mallet, you don't have to be like Mr. Strongman at the fun fair and absolutely smack it. You will do for the first few while it's quite high, but as soon as it gets lower to the ground, get your kneeling pad out, kneel down, don't put your back into it, just let the mallet do all the work, because that's why you've got a heavy mallet, and don't put your back out doing it, and well, try and enjoy the process. So you can see that post went in very nicely. I did accidentally clip the corner right at the end, but it's not really a problem. Then I went on to put on the horizontal brace bar, made sure that was level, and then levelled up the side braces and screwed them in. Once I've done that, I've then put in two support bars, as you can see, one there and one there, in between the last post, which is just around the corner. This all leads to a very strong structure. And then once the 18mm ply goes on top again and is screwed in, this is going to be absolutely solid. I could walk on that, But for now, we continue down the track. As you can see, there's no supports, so the first job is to put the post right at the end and then fill in the gaps. Let's get on. So as you can see, that's all complete now, and you can see just in there where I've got to. Right, so the next bit should be fairly easy because the timber itself is going to be kept straight. However, I do have to cut through the bush that's there. So as you can see, I've pushed the first of the next timbers through the route I want to go, and as you can see, it's rather full with this giant fern. So the knee pads come back out once again, and the big secateurs, and I want to make my own channel. So there we go. Now there is a clearing in that tree, as you can see, and I've put the post in, and that's solid and ready for paint. Now, believe it or not, that's the first section which will actually be straight. So I've been able to make this section separately on the floor nice and comfortably, and it fits perfectly. I've actually run out this horizontal 2x2. I've actually run out of that wood, so the railway will have to stop as it gets there for now, or they build, and that's stopped bang on 100 foot long. So slight miscalculation on the old timber front. Right, time to raise this up, get it on chocks, and get what I've done today painted, and hopefully it'll look better and blends in a bit more nicely. The straight piece is in. Obviously it's all painted, and I've gone on to fit the next section as well. Now, as you can see, the ground really drops off, and it gives the appearance that I'm making a ramp going into the sky. But you'll have to trust me, the railway itself is level. It's just the garden really drops off. Now, the next phase coming off this bit is going to be the return loop going around this nice tree just before the end of the garden, and then that'll go around the back, come all the way around the front and join back up somewhere, and then we have our first return loop and the end of what is stage 1. Before that, however, because I don't think the warm weather is going to hold off, I'm actually going to cut the plywood top now and start catching up with myself so we can start getting some track laid as well. So now the frame's coming on, it's time to get on with the exciting part, which is the top. Now, of course, I've got, as you can see here, a massive 8x4 sheet of ply, and of course this is 18mm thick. Now, I've gone for the untreated version mainly because there's a £20 difference in sheet from my local wood merchants. So that does mean that I have to do a few extra steps in the name of, once it's cut down, I have to treat it myself, paint it in the same sort of shed or fence paint that I've been using for the frame, and then I'm going to paint the edges with some waterproof PVA glue, which we'll see very soon. Before that, however, I've got to cut it up, and I have a few useful tips. Maybe not so necessary if you have access to all the tools, but because I've only got a jigsaw, I'm going to use this method. So there are 2 ways to do this. It has been suggested that I take my 8x4 sheet and lay it on the track bed, and then pencil in where the track goes and jigsaw that shape out. That will, of course, cause quite a bit of wastage. I'm trying not to waste PVA, and I'm trying to get it to go as far as possible. So my way is I'm going to take a piece of my bracing timber, measure out 10¼ inches, which is how wide my track bed is. On the 2 outside edges of the sheet, I'm going to jigsaw down one edge, and then this provides a lovely straight cut edge for the straight pieces of my track framing. So this edge and that side will be used for that. The middle, once I've got a wiggly jigsaw line, I will then cut into shorter strips, and then using my circular saw, I will cut into 10¼ inch pieces, and they look almost like wooden books, which I will then stagger around the corners, which you'll see in a bit. So hopefully that makes some sense. I've tried to demonstrate it as best I can here, but I think you'll only really see when I cut it up and get on with it. So let's get on. So just to hopefully show you a bit clearer, I'm going to first off measure each end, the 10¼ inch width of the track bed, using a pencil. Now once that's in, I'm going to roughly place the timber piece where I think it's going to go. Now the pencil mark here is there. I do need to, before I screw it in, just line up my jigsaw, because as you can see where the cutting blade is easily a good 1.5 inches away from the edge of the jigsaw. So if I line that up with where I think it is, what I'll then do is place my piece of timber to one side so it's flush, and then I'll drill that in, and then I'll do the same on the other side, and then again in the middle, and then I'll cut along this line with pushing against the timber, and all being well, we should have a relatively straight edge for a jigsaw. It's definitely worth taking that extra step. So here is part one of my cut up plywood. Now as you can see, by doing it like this, it just highlights the efficiency, in which case there's not much waste at all. I've coated it both sides and let it dry, and it is slightly raised off the ground, as you can probably see. The next phase is I'm going to glue the edges with PVA and get them in place, and then hopefully we're closer to laying some track. So as I've mentioned previously, the next level of protection for the plywood is to coat the edges, as you can see here, in PVA glue. Now I've used outdoor PVA glue. All this does is just help the plywood to not split in the moisture in the wetter months. Of course it will be covered over with the bitumen layer next, but every little helps. So moving on now, the plywood is in situ, the edges are glued. It's time to put the top layer on, the bitumen layer. Now this is traditionally used for shed roofs. Now this is upside down. I'm just marking it out to cut it. Now luckily for me, in half for these 1 meter wide sheets is perfect for the measurements I've done, so it goes twice as far and there's no real wastage. The only problem I have currently is I've got a very bored Cocker Spaniel who won't let me cut the sheet because she wants to go in, because she's getting bored of a garden railway. Don't worry guys, it's nearly the end of the video. Hold it, I've got no track. No one's got any track. Pico's been closed. You'll have to join me next week. Thanks for watching guys. Take care. Bye.